For 20 years, you and I sat in front of our televisions and watched a family build an empire. We watched the dirt turn into gold. We watched a pumpkin patch become a multi-million-dollar global destination. We thought we were watching a show about a family. We were wrong. We were watching the construction of a massive financial asset. And for the last 5 years, the story hasn't been about pumpkins. It's been about war. We watched the Roloff children, Zach and Jeremy, systematically pushed out of the negotiations. We watched the legacy crumble. We watched the tears. But while everyone was looking at the father who wouldn't sell and the sons who couldn't buy, nobody was looking at the man standing in the background. Amy Roloff left the big house to escape Matt's control. She wanted freedom. She wanted a fresh start. But did she unknowingly bring Matt's greatest ally right back into the heart of the operation? We need to talk about Chris Marek, not the husband, not the stepfather, not the guy who rides motorcycles and goes on walks. We need to talk about Chris Marek, the seasoned real estate agent with 2 decades of experience in the cutthroat Oregon housing market. Today, on LPBW Update, we are presenting the farm heist theory. The evidence suggests that Chris wasn't just hanging out with Matt during those critical months of negotiation. He was consulting. He was the buffer. He was the inside man. Think about it. While Zach was screaming about loyalty, Chris was talking about market value. While Amy was crying about memories, Chris was analyzing zoning laws. He is the Trojan horse that walked through the front gate, shook Matt's hand, and ensured the deal went down exactly how Matt Roloff wanted it to. This isn't a family drama anymore. This is a corporate thriller. And Chris Marek, he might just be the most brilliant player in the game. If you think you know what happened to the farm, you need to throw that timeline out the window. We have compiled listing data, body language analysis, and reports from the Helvetia real estate sector that paint a very different picture. But before we crack this file open, and we are going to go deep, I need you to do one thing. If you want us to keep exposing the truth that TLC tries to edit out, smash that like button right now. It triggers the algorithm and helps us fight the silence. Make sure you are subscribed to LPBW Update with notifications on. Who is Agent Marek? To understand the farm heist, we have to strip away the character of Chris the boyfriend that the show presented to us for seasons. The editors want you to see him as the gentle, slightly awkward guy who just wants everyone to get along. That is a distraction. Chris Marek is a shark, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a professional fact. You do not survive 20 years in Pacific Northwest real estate, specifically dealing with rural acreage and luxury properties, by being naive. We dug into the archives. Chris isn't selling starter condos to college students. His history includes land deals, rural estates, and properties with complex zoning rights. Why does this matter? Because when Matt Roloff started throwing around numbers that Zach and Jeremy claimed were astronomical and unfair, Chris Marek knew exactly what those numbers meant. Here is the first pillar of our theory, the strategy of silence. Picture the scene. You are a stepfather. You see your wife's son, your stepson, being told he isn't good enough or rich enough to take over the family legacy. You see the pain on Amy's face. The natural human reaction is defense. You speak up, you say, "Matt, cut the kid a break." Chris Marek did not do that. Why? Because a real estate agent knows that emotion kills the deal. We have received insider theories suggesting that long before the camera started rolling on the negotiation season, Chris had likely already run the comparables on Roloff Farms. He knew the price per acre. He knew the value of the commercial zoning for the pumpkin patch. When Matt offered the farm to the boys at a family discount that was still in the millions, Zach felt insulted. But Chris likely looked at that number and thought, that is statistically a steal. He couldn't tell Zach that. He couldn't tell Amy that. so he stayed silent. He let the boys walk away because from a purely financial standpoint, the standpoint of a realtor, the boys didn't have the capital to manage a distressed asset of that magnitude. This brings us to the conflict of interest that nobody at the network wanted to discuss. Can a realtor husband truly be neutral when his wife's ex-husband is selling a multi-million-dollar asset? Let's look at the Northside sale. Matt puts the big house and the 16 acres on the market. It sits. It doesn't sell. The price is high. Who is the one person in Amy's ear during this time? Chris. Did you catch that? That isn't husband talk. That is Agent Marek talk. He is constantly managing Amy's expectations, guiding her toward accepting Matt's business logic. There is a theory circulating in the deep dive forums that Chris was acting as an unofficial consultant to Matt. Not on paper, because that would be an ethical violation that could cost him his license, but socially. Think about the B plot, where Matt and Chris become best buddies. We're led to believe this is just two guys bonding. But look closer. What do two men, one a developer and one a realtor, talk about when the wives aren't around? They talk about the market, they talk about interest rates, they talk about exit strategies. Matt Roloff was tired. He wanted out. He wanted to liquidate, but he couldn't sell to a stranger without the public hating him. And he couldn't sell to his kids because they wanted a handout. He needed a bridge. He needed someone on Team Amy who understood the language of money. Enter Chris Marek. By validating Matt's pricing to Amy, Chris did the one thing Matt couldn't do himself. He legitimized the rejection of the twins. When Zach says, the price is too high, and Matt says, no, it's not, it's a fight. But when Zach says, the price is too high, and Chris Marek, the expert, says nothing, or tells Amy, actually it's fair, it ends the argument. Chris Marek provided the professional cover fire Matt needed to squeeze his own children out of the deal. And he did it without ever raising his voice. If the first phase of the heist was Chris's professional silence, the second phase was physical infiltration. This is where the story gets darker and where Amy's instincts, which were screaming at her, were completely ignored. We call this the Trojan horse phase. Let's analyze the tractor incident. To the casual viewer, this was a quirky storyline. Matt needs help with pumpkin season, and he asks Chris to be a tour guide. Haha, funny, right? The ex-husband and the new husband are working together. Wrong. Look at it through the lens of the heist theory. This was an employment contract. By accepting the role of tour guide and by accepting the gift of access to the tractor and the barn, Chris Marek secured a legitimate reason to be on Roloff Farms property without Amy present. It's interesting. That is the understatement of the century. Of course, it's interesting, Chris. It's a prime piece of real estate in Washington County that is currently undergoing a massive structural shift. We have observed a pattern in the footage from season 22 and 23. Pay attention to the background of Chris's scenes. How often do we see him checking things out? Checking the structural integrity of the barn, looking at the pump systems. There is a concept in corporate espionage called social engineering. It's where you manipulate people into giving you access to confidential information. Matt Roloff is a control freak. He doesn't let anyone touch his machines or his projects. He micromanages Caryn. He micromanaged the kids. So why suddenly does he hand the keys to the castle to Chris? An insider theory suggests that Matt respected Chris because Chris treated the farm like a business, not a playground. Matt saw an equal. But more importantly, Matt saw an ally who could control Amy. By befriending Chris, Matt neutralized Amy's anger. Every time Amy wanted to explode at Matt for his treatment of the boys, Chris would step in with the, let's be reasonable, he's just doing business line. Let's break down the body language of the private meetings. When Matt and Chris are alone, notice the shift in Chris's posture. With Amy, he is passive, slumped, listening. With Matt, He is leaning forward. He is engaged. There is a moment, scrub back to the episode where they are discussing the property lines for the rental, where Chris corrects Matt on a detail about the fence. Matt doesn't get angry. He nods. He accepts the correction. This proves that Chris had studied the survey maps. Why is the new husband studying the survey maps of the ex-husband's land? The Trojan horse wasn't just about being on the land. It was about gathering intelligence. Chris knew the maintenance costs. He knew the overhead. He knew the liabilities. So when Zach came to the table with his offer, Chris knew immediately that Zach couldn't afford the upkeep. And instead of helping Zach figure out a way to make it work, Chris protected the asset. He protected the value of the farm by letting the deal with the kids fail. And the saddest part of this infiltration, it required Chris to invalidate Amy's feelings repeatedly. Amy said, "This makes me uncomfortable." Amy said, "He treated me badly. Why are you his friend?" And Chris's response was always to normalize the abnormality. "We're just buddies. Don't be jealous." In the farm heist theory, this isn't insensitivity. It's a tactical maneuver to keep the channel open to Matt. He chose access to the deal over the comfort of his wife. We are just scratching the surface. We have established that Chris has the skills, the professional, and the access, the Trojan horse. But the smoking gun, that lies in the negotiation itself. We are going to break down the specific numbers. We're going to look at the wedding venue conspiracy. Why did Chris fight so hard to get married on Matt's property? Was it sentiment, or was it a marketing stunt to raise the property value right before the listing went live? And we're going to discuss the commission question. Did Chris Marek get a referral fee? We are dissecting how Chris Marek, a veteran real estate agent, may have orchestrated the sale of Roloff Farms from the inside. We've covered his silence. We've covered the friendship with Matt. But now we have to talk about the wedding. In the farm heist theory, the wedding wasn't just a celebration of love. It was a staging event. Any real estate agent will tell you, before you list a multi-million-dollar property, you have to maximize its curb appeal. You need to show its potential. Amy wanted to get married literally anywhere else. She looked at venues. She wanted distance. Who was the one pushing to bring the wedding back to the scene of the crime? Chris Marek. His argument was budget and convenience. But look at the timing. The wedding took place in August 2021. Matt listed the farm for sale in May 2022. That is a tight window. Matt Roloff used the wedding as an excuse to pour capital into the property, to renovate it, knowing he was about to sell. And Chris delivered the event that justified the construction. By holding a televised high-production wedding on the property, Chris Marek provided Matt with the ultimate marketing reel. They showcased the land as a luxury venue. They showed the sunsets. They showed versatility. We have heard whispers from local Oregon vendors that the specific improvements made for the wedding, the landscaping, the new barn facade, were exactly the features highlighted in the eventual real estate listing. Chris didn't just marry Amy on that land. He helped Matt stage the property for the global market. He turned a family farm into a turnkey commercial venue right before our eyes. And he convinced Amy that it was all for her special day. Now we arrive at the ugliest chapter of this story, the moment the mask slipped. When the negotiations between Matt and the twin boys, Zach and Jeremy, collapsed, the audience was shocked. We saw a father reject his sons. But if you look at the footage again, you will see Chris Marek standing in the shadows, holding the smoking gun. We call this the negotiation proxy. The most damning evidence of the farm heist is Chris's reaction to the price. When Matt asked for $4 million for 16 acres, the internet exploded. Fans called Matt greedy. Zach called Matt delusional. But who defended the price? Chris Marek. Listen to the words Chris uses when he explains the situation to Amy. He doesn't use family language. He doesn't say, "That's too bad for Zach." He says things like, "What? Well, the market is hot." He says, "Yeah, Matt has a right to get fair value." He talks about comparables. At this moment, Chris stops being a stepfather. He becomes Matt's good cop. Imagine if Chris had taken Zach's side. Imagine if Chris, with his 20 years of real estate knowledge, had looked at Amy and said, "Honey, Matt is price gouging the boys. That land isn't worth $4 million without the big house." If Chris had said that, Amy would have gone to war. She would have publicly blasted Matt. She might have sued. It would have created a PR nightmare that could have devalued the property or forced Matt to lower the price. But Chris didn't do that. He managed the asset by managing Amy. He neutralized the threat. He kept Amy from interfering in Matt's business dealings by convincing her that Matt's logic was sound. There is a scene where Zach is clearly icing Chris out. Zach knows. Zach isn't stupid. He sensed that Chris was Team Matt when it came to the money. Why would a stepfather be okay with the family being torn apart? Because in the mind of a high-level real estate agent, business is business. Chris viewed the farm as a financial portfolio, not a legacy. He knew that selling to the kids at a discount was a bad financial move for Matt. And since he aligns himself with smart business, he sided with the seller, not the buyers. He watched Matt break his son's hearts, and he nodded in approval of the business strategy. This brings us to the question everyone is afraid to ask. Why? Why would Chris betray the emotional trust of his wife to help her ex-husband? Is he just a nice guy caught in the middle? Or is there a financial incentive? Let's talk about the referral fee. In the real estate world, you don't have to be the one putting the sign in the yard to get paid. If Agent A refers a client to Agent B, Agent A gets a referral fee, usually 25 to 30% of the commission. We checked the listings. Chris Marek was not the official listing agent for Roloff Farms. That would be too obvious. It would be a conflict of interest that TLC couldn't hide. But here is the theory circulating among industry insiders in Washington County. Did Chris Marek consult on the listing? Did he refer to the specific luxury brokerage that Matt used? If the farm sells for $4 million, the commission is roughly $240,000. A 240,000, a 25% referral fee on one side of that deal is $240,000. A 25, $30,000 to $60,000. That is a lot of money for a few conversations and keeping Amy calm. But there is a bigger play here than a quick commission check. It's the Roloff brand preservation. Chris is smart. He knows that Amy's lifestyle, and by extension his lifestyle, is funded by the TLC show and the Roloff fame. If Matt had sold the farm to the kids for cheap, the drama ends. The empire shrinks. The money dries up. By Matt holding out for a high price or turning it into a short-term rental, which Chris also supported, the show has a storyline. The conflict continues. The checks keep clearing. Chris acted as a fiduciary for the Roloff Inc. Corporation. He ensured that the asset, the farm, retained its maximum on-paper value. Did he get a kickback? We may never see the bank records. But did he benefit from Matt Roloff remaining a multi-millionaire land baron rather than a retired grandpa who gave it all away? Absolutely. If Matt stays rich, the ecosystem stays rich. And Chris lives in that ecosystem. So is Chris Marek a villain? Is he a snake in the grass, as some comments suggest? Or is he simply the perfect agent? He walked into a chaotic, emotional, messy divorce situation involving millions of dollars in real estate. He assessed the players. He identified the decision maker, Matt. He managed the opposition, Amy. And he froze out the competition, Zach and Jeremy. The farm heist wasn't a theft. He didn't steal the deed in the middle of the night. It was a heist of influence. Chris Marek stole the narrative. He convinced Amy that Matt's greed was actually market logic. He convinced the audience that he was just a bystander. But the evidence, the body language, the timing of the wedding, the defense of the price points to one conclusion. Chris Marek was the most effective employee Matt Roloff ever had. And Matt didn't even have to put him on the payroll. All he had to do was let him marry his ex-wife. The farm is gone. The legacy is broken. The kids are estranged. But the deal was handled professionally, just the way Agent Marek likes it. This theory changes everything about how you rewatch season 22 and 23. You won't be able to unsee the glances between Matt and Chris. You won't be able to unhear the way Chris shuts down Amy's complaints. But I want to know what you think. Is Chris Marek a mastermind who played both sides to protect the money? Or is he just a guy who likes tractors and hates conflict? I've pinned a comment below with a link to the property records we discussed. Go look at the dates. Tell me I'm wrong. And listen, if you thought this was dark, you need to see our next investigation. We are bringing in a literal FBI-trained behaviorist to analyze Caryn Chandler's facial micro-expressions during the sale. You do not want to miss that. Like this video if you want the truth. Subscribe so you don't get left behind. This is LPBW Update. We'll see you in the comments.